Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments in human history when the boundary between genius and vulnerability blurs so profoundly that we are forced to ask ourselves, what truly drives the mind of a visionary? Tonight, I want to take you into that delicate territory, the inner world of a man who has redefined possibility, who has launched humanity toward Mars, electrified our highways, and rewired our understanding of risk. Yet behind every towering intellect lies a pulse of emotion, a secret rhythm that shapes every decision, every obsession, every sleepless night. And that rhythm is never more exposed than in the quiet gravity of a relationship. You see, when a person carries the weight of galaxies in their imagination, their private connections often reveal what logic alone cannot explain. Because relationships, especially the hidden ones, the ones unseen by headlines or algorithms, have a way of exposing the architecture of a person's mind. They reveal not only how a person loves, but how they fears, how they repairs, and how they breaks. What I want to show you tonight is not gossip nor speculation. It's a psychological map, a window into the neuroscience of attachment, the behavioral patterns of genius, and the fragile link between ambition and emotional survival. The so-called secret relationship of a figure like this is not about scandal. It is about signal. It's about decoding the way an extraordinary mind negotiates the ordinary human need to be seen, to be understood, to be safe. Imagine for a moment what it means to live at the edge of possibility, to wake each day knowing the world's future might depend on your choices. That pressure is not abstract. It creates biochemical ripples, shifts in dopamine, cortisol, serotonin, that sculpt the very structure of thought. Studies in neuropsychology have shown that sustained exposure to extreme pressure alters the prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational planning, and strengthens the amygdala's influence, which governs emotion and threat detection. This means that over time, the boundary between emotional instinct and intellectual calculation blurs. Now imagine trying to love someone through that fog. When a person's entire nervous system is calibrated for risk, innovation, and control, love becomes not a refuge but a paradox. The very neural pathways that help one conquer uncertainty in business can make intimacy feel like danger. The same brain that thrives on solving impossible problems may struggle to surrender to emotional unpredictability. And yet, this is where the story becomes fascinating. Sometimes, precisely because of that paradox, love becomes the one domain where control must collapse. The relationship we're discussing tonight, quiet, unseen, yet profoundly influential, served as a mirror. It revealed not the engineer, not the entrepreneur, but the human circuitry beneath, the way he responded to affection, to distance, to misunderstanding. It all painted a neurological portrait. There was a pattern of oscillation intensity followed by withdrawal, clarity followed by silence. Psychologists call this approach avoidance behavior, a hallmark of individuals whose attachment style has been shaped by both high sensitivity and early emotional turbulence. And make no mistake, this pattern is not weakness, it's adaptation. Many high-achieving individuals develop what's called emotional compartmentalization. It's a survival mechanism. You build mental silos, one for work, one for pain, one for love. But what happens when someone walks into your life who refuses to fit neatly into any of those silos? What happens when emotional connection demands integration instead of separation? That's when the shield begins to crack. For years, he operated like a closed circuit, energy in, output out, feedback minimal. Every problem was a formula, every decision a function. But love, as any neuroscientist will tell you, is not a linear system. It's chaotic, nonlinear, and fractal. It defies optimization. It's full of noise. And yet, within that noise, the brain finds pattern, and within that pattern, meaning. The person who entered his life did something extraordinary. She didn't challenge his empire. She challenged his logic. She asked questions he couldn't answer with data. She introduced variables that didn't belong to equations. She brought back something he had long exiled from his mental ecosystem: vulnerability. Vulnerability, neuroscientifically speaking, is not a weakness, but a recalibration of neural networks associated with trust and empathy. Functional MRI studies show that when we allow ourselves to be emotionally open, regions like the anterior cingulate cortex and the insula light up, regions crucial for emotional regulation and decision making. For someone accustomed to suppressing these signals in favor of pure logic, this sudden neural activation can feel disorienting, even destabilizing. In those moments, something fascinating happened in his mind. The constant hum of strategic thinking quieted, if only briefly. The obsessive loops, the kind that replay failures, optimize plans, and forecast disaster, paused. It was as if an overloaded supercomputer suddenly found a reboot sequence in the simplest of human gestures. A word, a touch, a silence shared at midnight. But love, especially for minds like his, is not sustained by simplicity alone. It demands a new kind of endurance, emotional endurance. And that is perhaps the hardest test for a person who has built their life around external achievement. The relationship exposed how deeply the drive for control was entwined with fear of loss. He wasn't afraid of failure. Failure was familiar, even energizing. He was afraid of dependence, because dependence meant risk, the one kind that data can't insure you against. And so, the push and pull began, the mind oscillating between connection and retreat, each moment of closeness triggering the same neural alarm as an approaching asteroid, yet each retreat leaving behind a void that no invention, no headline, no rocket launch could fill. That's when the deeper truth emerged, that brilliance and loneliness often share the same neural corridor. Studies on creative genius consistently reveal elevated activity in the brain's default mode network, the same system active during daydreaming, imagination, and introspection. This network, when overdeveloped, can generate both extraordinary ideas and profound isolation. It allows for visionary leaps but makes emotional grounding difficult. The secret relationship became, in a way, a bridge, a neural balancing act between solitude and intimacy. She saw the storm behind the stillness. She recognized that his silence wasn't apathy, it was processing. His distance wasn't rejection, it was calibration. Every time he withdrew, he wasn't walking away. He was trying to translate emotion into logic, love into data, care into systems. But love cannot be coded, it can only be felt. And so again and again, his algorithms failed him. And yet, each failure was a form of learning. Over time, something shifted. The man who once saw emotions as inefficiencies began to see them as energy sources. He realized that the human heart, irrational, unpredictable, uncontrollable, was the same kind of system that drives discovery. Because to love is to risk the unknown. And that's precisely what innovation is. And this is where we find the real revelation. The relationship, hidden from the public, revealed not who he loved, but how he thought. It showed that even the most rational mind cannot exist in isolation from emotion. It demonstrated that genius, when stripped of empathy, loses its propulsion. For a man building civilizations among the stars, it was love, not logic, that reminded him of gravity. When he spoke of building a future for humanity, there was always a glint of something personal in his tone, an unspoken sense of redemption. It wasn't just about saving the species, it was about saving the self, because every person who dreams of transcending Earth must first learn to inhabit it fully. And that means connection, it means risk, it means being human. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where the story deepens. He began to understand that emotional connection was not a distraction from purpose, but the missing equation that made purpose complete. For years, he had sought validation from the vastness of space, from the applause of invention, from the measurable victories of logic. But in private, he began to see that the human brain, no matter how optimized, hungers for resonance, that gentle synchronization between two nervous systems that neuroscientists call interpersonal attunement. When two people truly connect, their brainwaves begin to align. Studies using EEG and hyperscanning technologies have shown that in moments of deep empathy, the electrical activity in separate brains starts to mirror. The rhythm of breath aligns. The heart rate synchronizes. For a man accustomed to leading machines, this realization, that a heartbeat could sync like an algorithm, was both terrifying and liberating. The relationship revealed to him that intellect without empathy is like propulsion without direction. You can move fast, but you don't know where you're going. And for someone whose life was defined by velocity, this was the first time he felt stillness. Not the stillness of failure, but the stillness of presence. For once, he wasn't building a future, he was living a moment. But love, especially in the context of high ambition, is not linear. The higher the altitude, the thinner the emotional oxygen. There were moments when the distance between them felt cosmic, not because of space, but because of the gravitational pull of his mission. People like him often face what psychologists term existential compression, a narrowing of emotional range due to the immensity of responsibility. When you carry humanity's expectations on your back, you unconsciously compress personal needs to survive the pressure. But suppressed emotion doesn't vanish, it transforms, it finds new channels. Sometimes it leaks out as irritability, sometimes as obsession, sometimes as silence so deep it feels infinite. And in those silences, he learned one of the most painful but beautiful truths about the human mind, that silence is not emptiness, it's processing, it's integration, it's the psyche stitching together fragments of identity into coherence. The woman who had entered his life understood this. She didn't demand constant communication. She understood that for a mind that processes the universe, love must be given room to breathe. She once said, or perhaps implied, that loving him was like loving the wind invisible but everywhere. And though he couldn't say it aloud, he knew she had touched something sacred, the part of him that still remembered what it felt like to be seen, not as a symbol, but as a man. There is a phenomenon in neuroscience called mirror neuron resonance. When we witness another's emotional state, our brain simulates it internally. It's empathy at a cellular level. For him, being with her reactivated those neurons that had long gone dormant. It awakened emotional memory, childhood loss, longing, all the data points he had buried beneath technology and ambition resurfaced. And instead of resisting, he began to translate those emotions into purpose. That's when his tone changed, when his vision of the future became more human, more poetic, more anchored in collective survival rather than conquest. He once said in a private conversation, "The hardest thing about changing the world is learning how not to lose yourself in the process." That statement wasn't philosophy. It was confession. It was an echo of his own mind learning to reconcile the duality between creation and connection. Because for every invention that propels humanity forward, there must be an emotional counterpart that reminds us why we move forward at all. And yet, the irony of love for a visionary is that it often becomes unsustainable. The same drive that builds empires also dismantles intimacy. The constant pursuit of the future consumes the present. He struggled with that paradox every day. How do you love deeply while living in perpetual acceleration? How do you nurture connection when your very existence is calibrated for disruption? In the end, what emerged was neither a perfect romance nor a tragic ending, but a revelation. He realized that love, like innovation, is an act of courage. It's not the absence of fear, but the decision to move through it. The relationship taught him that no matter how far he ventured into the cosmos, the most mysterious frontier would always be the human heart. He began to integrate emotional intelligence into his leadership. He spoke differently to his teams, pausing longer, listening more. He learned that empathy doesn't slow progress, it refines it. His creativity flourished not despite emotion, but because of it. That's the irony the world rarely sees, that the secret to his endurance wasn't detachment, but rediscovered connection. Behind closed doors, he began journaling again, not technical notes, but reflections. Fragments of dreams, lines about memory, fear, wonder. The act of writing wasn't a mechanical record, it was emotional catharsis. Writing activates the hippocampus, which integrates emotional and cognitive processing. It literally rebalances the mind. And through this process, he began to heal the very neural imbalances that relentless innovation had created. It's tempting to believe that great minds are fueled by logic alone. But the truth is, they are sustained by emotion, by invisible currents of meaning. The relationship revealed that he didn't build for admiration or legacy. He built because he loved the world, humanity, the possibility that someone might look up at a rocket and feel hope again. And that, I think, is the heart of it all. The secret relationship wasn't about secrecy. It was about sanctity. It was about one human being finding, amid the noise of ambition, the stillness of connection. That stillness reprogrammed his perception of success. Success was no longer about distance traveled, but about closeness achieved. One evening, as he watched the stars through reinforced glass, he reportedly said softly, "We always look out there for answers, but everything we're searching for has been inside us from the start." It was an unrecorded moment. No cameras, no headlines, but those words captured the essence of a transformation few ever witness. Because the greatest shift in any human mind is not when it conquers the universe, but when it learns to coexist with its own heart, when the logic of progress finally bows to the rhythm of empathy, when genius learns grace. And perhaps that is the true revelation of his mind, that even amidst the machinery of the future, the human heart remains the ultimate engine. That behind every invention, every risk, every leap into the unknown, there is always a pulse, a story, a secret relationship that reminds us why we dream in the first place. So, as we look toward tomorrow, toward the technologies that will reshape our species, let us not forget the lesson encoded in that story. It is not brilliance that sustains civilization. It is compassion. It is connection. It is the courage to be human, even when the world expects you to be superhuman. And maybe that is what his secret truly revealed. Not weakness, but wisdom. That even the mind that aims for Mars still orbits the gravity of love. Thank you,